Alone in the quiet corridors of a Chicago hospital, a young nurse dances so she doesn't forget herself. Atop a luxury high-rise, a powerful CEO observes the world from above until an unexpected image pierces through his armor. He has everything except peace. She has nothing except her own heart. When fate crosses their paths on one improbable night, a story is born that neither of them expected to live. But between restrained glances, kisses that burn in the silence, and barriers that seem impossible to overcome, love might just be within reach. The emergency lights of Mercy General Hospital cast dancing shadows down the long corridors of the 7th floor. It was 3:30 in the morning, and Sophia Miller moved with quiet steps between medicine carts, carrying a tray with the last of the nightly doses. Her white sneakers barely brushed the gleaming floor, as if she had learned to walk on clouds so as not to disturb the sleep of others. At 26, Sophia had cultivated a particular grace in these hallways. It wasn't just about the 3 years of experience as an agency nurse, but something deeper, an almost desperate need to find beauty amid the exhaustion that consumed her day after day. Her colleagues on the night shift had grown accustomed to seeing her move with that unique elegance, as if every step were part of a secret choreography. She finished administering medication in room 307, where Mr. Franklin was sleeping peacefully after his hip surgery. The old man had squeezed her hand before closing his eyes, whispering, "Thank you, dear," which went straight to her heart. These small moments kept her going, made the weight of the unpaid bills piling up in her nightstand drawer bearable. Leaving the room, Sophia felt a familiar melody begin to play in her head. Jan Tiersen's Comptine de notre été had become her nightly companion, a piece she'd discovered by chance in a Wicker Park coffee shop during college. The music soothed her, transported her to a place where the weight of the world didn't press so heavily on her shoulders. She glanced down both ends of the hall. She was alone. Caroline, her shift partner, was reviewing charts at the nurses' station at the other end of the floor. The night supervisor was making her rounds on the ground floor. This was her moment. Sophia closed her eyes and let the internal music guide her. Her arms rose slowly, like the branches of a tree seeking light. Her feet began to move in a delicate, restrained, almost imperceptible dance. It wasn't the dance of a professional, but of a woman who had learned to converse with loneliness, transforming it into movement. In her mind, she wasn't in a hospital corridor at 3:30 in the morning. She was on the stage of the Chicago Theater in a tulle gown that billowed with her breath. The audience watched her, captivated, as she sang with a voice she once believed would take her far away from Pilsen, far from the worries that woke her every night with thoughts of her mother. Her fingers reached toward the faint glow of the emergency light, as if she could capture between them all the dreams she'd had to pack away in cardboard boxes. For a few precious minutes, Sophia wasn't an agency nurse, living in constant fear that her contract wouldn't be renewed. She wasn't the daughter who helped her mother take her medication every morning after the stroke. She wasn't the young woman who fell asleep, calculating if the few remaining dollars would be enough for rent. She was just Sophia, a woman who once dreamed of lighting up the world with her voice. The sound of distant footsteps brought her sharply back to reality. She stopped, her heart pounding, and smoothed her blue scrubs. Caroline was approaching with a knowing smile. "Dancing with the hospital ghosts again," her friend whispered affectionately. Sophia smiled, feeling a blush creep into her cheeks. "It's my way of staying sane during these endless shifts." Caroline gave her that motherly look she'd developed, even though she was only 30. "Someday, someone's going to see you dance like that and realize just how special you are." Sophia shook her head, picking up the empty tray. "Nobody looks at agency nurses, Caroline. We're invisible." She didn't know that at that very moment, a dozen miles away, a man who couldn't sleep was reviewing security footage from the hospital he had just acquired, searching for irregularities in the nightly protocols, and had just witnessed the most beautiful dance of his life. Alexander Cole's penthouse on the Gold Coast seemed an extension of his soul. elegant, orderly, and profoundly silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a privileged view of the Chicago River and the city lights. But on this April night, the city skyline blurred before his tired eyes like watercolor bleeding on damp canvas. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and insomnia had once again visited him like an old, unwanted friend. Alexander had grown accustomed to these sleepless nights since taking over as CEO of the Provita Health Group at 35. The burden of proving he was worthy of the hospital empire he had inherited from his father had become a weight that never left him, not even in sleep. He poured himself an 18-year-old scotch and sat at his mahogany desk. An anonymous tip that had arrived at his office that afternoon had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Someone was suggesting irregularities on the night shifts at Mercy General Hospital, the group's latest acquisition. "Neglect in patient care," the concise message read. "Check the early morning hours." Alexander had built his reputation on operational perfection. Every hospital under his watch ran like a Swiss watch, with rigorous protocols and highly qualified staff. He couldn't afford a scandal that would tarnish the name he had spent years cleaning up from his predecessor's excesses. He connected his laptop to the main screen in his home office and accessed Mercy General's surveillance system. His fingers, accustomed to navigating spreadsheets and financial reports, moved with precision through the monitoring software's menu. Floor by floor, corridor by corridor, he began to review the recordings from the past week. Everything seemed normal. Nurses making rounds, residents attending to emergencies, cleaning staff doing their nightly work. The protocols were being followed to the letter. He paused on the 7th floor. The image on the screen showed something that made him frown. A female figure was moving between the medicine carts with a grace he hadn't expected to find in the sterile environment of a hospital. The quality of the night vision recording wasn't perfect, but there was something in the way this woman moved that immediately captured his attention. Alexander adjusted the image contrast and zoomed in. The nurse was finishing her rounds in room 307 and emerged into the hallway with quiet steps. Then something extraordinary happened. She closed her eyes, lifted her arms, and began to move as if guided by an invisible music. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something real break through the armor of detachment he had built around his heart. The woman danced in the shadows of the hospital with an authenticity that completely disarmed him. It wasn't a professional or rehearsed dance. It was pure emotion, transformed into movement, a silent conversation between a woman and her loneliness. He found himself leaning toward the screen, studying every gesture, every extension of her arms toward the faint light of the emergency lamps. There was something in that dance that spoke of hidden dreams, of an inner strength that manifested in the most unexpected beauty. Alexander rewound the recording and watched it again, and a third time. With each viewing, the feeling that he was witnessing something sacred intensified. This woman was transforming a cold hospital corridor into a stage where the impossible seemed possible. How long had it been since something had moved him so profoundly? When was the last time he had felt that true beauty existed in the world, beyond the numbers in financial statements and expansion strategies? His thoughts were interrupted by the memory of his father, Edward Cole, the man who had built Provita from nothing and who never missed an opportunity to remind him that inheriting an empire was easy, but maintaining it required sacrifices not everyone was prepared to make. Weakness is the enemy of leadership, he would say, during family dinners that felt more like board meetings. A man who allows himself to be carried away by emotion is destined to lose everything his ancestors built. But watching this nurse dance in the solitude of the hospital, Alexander wondered if he had mistaken strength for invulnerability, if in his quest to prove he was a worthy heir, he had ultimately become an empty version of himself. He saved the recording to a special folder on his computer and made a note in his calendar for an unannounced visit to Mercy General the next day. He wasn't going as a CEO investigating irregularities, but as a man who needed to understand the meaning of the dance that had managed to breach a defense he had thought impenetrable. When he finally went to bed near dawn, Alexander Cole had a dream for the first time in months. He dreamed of a woman dancing in the shadows and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the controlled and predictable world he had built to protect himself from pain. Mercy General Hospital was humming with its usual morning activity when Alexander Cole walked unannounced through the main doors. His dark grey, impeccably tailored suit and freshly polished Oxfords contrasted with the functional environment of the medical facility, but he walked with the confidence of someone who knows he owns every inch of ground he steps on. Margaret Kowalski, the head of nursing, nearly choked on her coffee when she saw him in her office. "Mr. Cole, we weren't expecting you. Is something wrong?" "Just a routine inspection, Margaret. I want to see for myself how the night shifts are running. I've received some reports and prefer to check in person." The 50-year-old woman, with over 20 years of experience in the hospital system, felt a chill. Unannounced visits from the CEO never boded well. "Of course. Is there a specific department you'd like to see?" "The 7th floor. I want to speak with the night staff who are just finishing their shift." As they rode the elevator, Alexander felt a strange sense of anticipation. The recording from the previous night had stayed in his mind like a persistent melody. He needed to put a face to the figure who had managed to move him so unexpectedly. The 7th floor was imbued with that particular calm of the early morning hours. Patients were having breakfast in their rooms, while the day staff took over from their night shift colleagues. Alexander walked down the same corridor where he had seen the dance, trying to recognize every detail he remembered from the recording. And then he saw her. Sophia Miller was finishing an update on Mr. Franklin's chart in room 307. Her blue scrubs were immaculate despite 12 hours on duty, and her chestnut hair, pulled back in a high ponytail, revealed the elegant line of her neck. There was something in the way she moved, even in a task as mundane as fluffing a patient's pillow, that confirmed Alexander's suspicion. This was the woman from the dance. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Franklin?" Sophia asked with a genuine smile as she took the old man's blood pressure. "Better, dear, much better. I had beautiful dreams last night. I think it was because of that song you were humming in the hallway." Sophia blushed slightly. "I didn't know you could hear me. I hope I wasn't disturbing you." "Quite the opposite. It reminded me of my wife when she was young. She used to sing under her breath too, when she thought no one was listening." Alexander watched the scene from the doorway, fascinated by the natural warmth that emanated from this woman. It wasn't just professionalism, it was a genuine human connection that went beyond medical protocol. Margaret cleared her throat discreetly. "Nurse Miller, may I introduce Mr. Alexander Cole, the CEO of Provita?" Sophia turned abruptly, and for a moment her eyes met Alexander's. It was only a second, but he felt something shift inside him, as if that gaze had opened a door he thought was locked forever. "Mr. Cole," Sophia murmured, trying to hide the nervousness the unexpected encounter caused her. A soft pink flush, which did not escape his notice, colored her cheeks. "Nurse Miller," Alexander replied, his voice softer than usual. "I won't interrupt for long. I just wanted to meet the night staff and get a better understanding of how these shifts operate." Mr. Franklin piped up from his bed. "Young man, if you want to know what it's like here at night, there's no one better than Sophia. This girl has a special gift for taking care of the sick." Alexander noticed how the nurse lowered her gaze, embarrassed by the compliment. "Do you really enjoy your work?" he asked, with a genuine curiosity that surprised even himself. Sophia looked up, and for a moment she seemed to forget who he was. Her brown eyes shone with an intensity that completely disarmed him. "I like easing other people's pain, even if it's just for a few minutes." The sentence struck Alexander in the chest like a well-aimed arrow. When was the last time someone had given him such a sincere answer, so devoid of calculation and self-interest? How long have you been working at Mercy General? He continued, aware that he was prolonging a conversation that should have been purely procedural. 3 years, sir, as an agency nurse, Sophia replied, a note of vulnerability in her voice that she couldn't quite hide. Alexander immediately caught the precariousness contained in those words. Agency contracts meant insecurity, low pay, no benefits. He wondered what circumstances had led such an obviously talented nurse to live with such professional uncertainty. Your night work must be very demanding, he commented, noticing the fine lines of fatigue around her eyes. It is, she admitted, but it has its rewards. The night has a special magic. Everything is quieter, more authentic. The word authentic echoed in Alexander's mind, reminding him of his own thoughts from the previous night. This woman had managed to express in one word what he had been searching for years, without knowing it. Margaret interjected, reminding him they had other floors to inspect, but Alexander wasn't ready to end this encounter. It was a pleasure to meet you, Nurse Miller. I hope we have the chance to speak again. As they walked away down the corridor, Sophia stood motionless by Mr. Franklin's bed, her heart beating a frantic rhythm. There was something in that man's gaze that had pierced her like lightning, something she couldn't decipher, but that left her with a strange feeling, as if something had just begun that she had no idea how to end. A week after the encounter at the hospital, Sophia received a cream-colored envelope with the Provita letterhead, which confused her completely. Caroline, her shift partner, watched as she opened the letter with trembling hands in the small break room on the 7th floor. "What is it?" Caroline asked, noticing the look of disbelief on her friend's face. Sophia read the letter a second time, as if the words might change their meaning. It's an invitation to the annual Provita Gala, this Saturday, at the Drake Hotel. Her voice was incredulous. And it's signed by Alexander Cole. Caroline nearly choked on her coffee. The CEO is personally inviting you to his corporate gala. This can't be right, Sophia muttered, studying the elegant calligraphy of the signature. Agency nurses don't go to these kinds of events. It has to be a mistake. But deep down, she knew it wasn't a mistake. She remembered perfectly the intensity of Alexander's gaze during their brief meeting, the way he had prolonged the conversation beyond necessity, the different tone in his voice when he asked questions that seemed to go beyond business protocol. For the next few days, Sophia wavered between curiosity and common sense. What could a nurse from Pilsen possibly have in common with the executives and medical elite who would undoubtedly be at the event? And what intentions could a man like Alexander Cole have in inviting her? It was Caroline who finally convinced her. "Sophia, when was the last time you did something just for you? When was the last time you let yourself experience something beautiful without calculating whether you deserved it or not?" Her words struck a chord. It was true that her life had been reduced to an endless cycle of hospital shifts, caring for her mother, and financial worries. She hadn't allowed herself anything that wasn't absolutely necessary for survival in a long time. On Friday afternoon, Sophia went to a small thrift store in Logan Square she had known since her college days. For the few dollars she had managed to save, she found a navy blue dress with a simple but elegant cut that fit her perfectly. It wasn't haute couture, but it had a discreet class that highlighted her natural beauty without trying to make her into someone she wasn't. On Saturday night, as she applied a touch of makeup in front of her bedroom mirror, her mother watched her from the bed with a knowing smile. "You look beautiful, honey. I haven't seen you glow like this in a long time." "It's just a work dinner, Mom," Sophia murmured, although they both knew it was something more. "Sometimes the most important things in life come disguised as coincidences," her mother replied, with the wisdom that comes from years and pain. The Drake Hotel was glittering with a breathtaking elegance that night. Sophia felt completely out of place as a uniformed doorman greeted her at the entrance. The arriving guests wore outfits that probably cost more than her 3-month salary. When she gave her name at the reception desk, the surprise was palpable. She was escorted directly into the main ballroom, where the head table was reserved for the guests of honor. Her place was marked with a card that read, Ms. Sophia Miller, right next to the seat reserved for the CEO. Alexander appeared a few minutes later, impeccable in a black tuxedo that accentuated his impressive build. When their eyes met across the room, Sophia felt the world stop for a moment. He walked straight to her with a smile that completely transformed his usually serious face. Sophia, he said her name as if it were a precious word. I'm so glad you could make it. Mr. Cole, I'm not sure why I'm here, she admitted with an honesty that made her cheeks burn. You're here because I needed an authentic voice at this table full of prepared speeches, he replied, offering her his arm. And please, call me Alexander. During dinner, he introduced her to the other guests as an essential voice in the reality of our hospitals, describing her work with a respect that surprised her. The conversations revolved around medical ethics, humanization projects, and the importance of maintaining the human factor in modern medicine. Sophia was surprised to find herself participating with a naturalness she hadn't expected, contributing perspectives from her direct experience with patients that enriched debates often confined to theory. Alexander listened to her with an attentiveness that made her feel valued in a completely new way. After dinner, he invited her for a walk on the hotel terrace, which offered a spectacular view of the illuminated Willis Tower. The cool Chicago air created an unexpected intimacy between them. "Can I confess something to you?" Alexander asked, leaning against the marble balustrade. Sophia nodded, feeling her heart race. "I saw you dance." The words fell between them like stones in a quiet pond. Sophia froze, fearing a reprimand, imagining she had been caught in a moment of vulnerability that could cost her her job. But Alexander continued, his voice softer than it had been all evening. "It was the most authentic thing I've seen in a very long time." Their gazes locked under the golden lights of Chicago, and for the first time in years, both Sophia and Alexander felt that something real was beginning to bloom in the shadows of their carefully constructed lives. The days after the gala passed in a blur for Sophia. Alexander's words echoed in her mind as she worked her night shifts, creating a strange duality between the hospital routine and the memory of that magical night on the terrace of the Drake. "It was the most authentic thing I've seen in a very long time." What did that mean, coming from a man like him? And why had that confession touched her so deeply, as if someone had turned on a light in a room that had been dark for years? Caroline immediately noticed the change in her friend. Sophia worked with the same efficiency as always, but there was something different in the way she moved, a new lightness that hadn't been there before. "Are you going to tell me what happened at that gala, or am I going to have to imagine it?" Caroline asked as they prepared medications for the nightly rounds. "It was strange," Sophia admitted. "I didn't feel out of place, like I expected. He made me feel like my opinion actually mattered." We're already on a first-name basis?" Sophia blushed, aware she had revealed more than she intended. "It's complicated, Caroline. I don't understand what's happening." The answer came later that week, in the form of a phone call from Margaret Kowalski. The head of nursing summoned her to her office with an urgency that immediately set off all of Sophia's alarms. Was there a problem with her work? Had someone reported her late-night dancing? Margaret received her with an unreadable expression, gesturing to the chair in front of her desk. "Sophia, I've received a very specific proposal regarding your future at this hospital." Sophia's heart stopped for a second. "A proposal?" "Mr. Cole has requested the creation of a new position, Patient Well-Being Coordinator. You would be responsible for developing humanization programs for patient care, especially on the night shifts." Sophia blinked, unable to fully process what she was hearing. "And what does that have to do with me?" "He specifically requested that you be offered the position. It's a permanent contract, salary equivalent to a head nurse, full benefits." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. I don't understand. Why me? Margaret leaned forward, studying her face. That's the exact same question I asked myself. But after reviewing your file and speaking with several patients, I think I have the answer. You have something that can't be taught in medical school, a genuine connection to the suffering of others. But I'm an agency nurse. I don't have experience in coordination or a degree in healthcare administration. You would have full support for any additional training you might need. Mr. Cole was very clear. This offer is based on your professional merits and your human qualities, not on any other factor. Sophia felt tears welling in her eyes. The offer was more than she had ever dreamed of, a solution to all her financial problems, a chance to care for her mother without the constant fear of money. Can I think about it? Of course, but not for too long. Mr. Cole wants the program to launch next month. That night, Sophia walked the hospital corridors with a mixture of hope and confusion. Was this offer really due to her professional merits, or was there something more to it? The line between the personal and the professional had become dangerously blurred since the night of the gala. She found clarity in room 307. Mr. Franklin was awake, waiting for her, as if he knew she needed to talk. You look troubled, dear. Mr. Franklin, do you think opportunities come when we deserve them, or when we least expect them? The old man smiled with the wisdom of a life lived. I think they come when we are ready to receive them, even if we don't realize it. Your work here, the way you care for all of us, it's not a coincidence, it's who you are. The next day, Sophia called Margaret to accept the offer, but before hanging up, she made a request. Could I please schedule a meeting with Mr. Cole? I need to speak with him in person. 2 days later, Alexander was waiting for her in his office at the hospital. When she entered, he felt again that internal shift her presence caused in him, as if each encounter stirred something deep within his carefully armored soul. Sophia, I'm glad you accepted the position. Mr. Cole, Alexander, she corrected herself. I need to understand why me. Is it really because of my work? He watched her for a long moment, aware that his answer would define the direction of everything he felt. Yes, it's because of your work, but it's also because you showed me that professional excellence and humanity don't have to be mutually exclusive. That's something I need to learn. Their eyes met, and in that moment, they both knew they were crossing a line that would change everything between them forever. Sophia's first weeks as patient well-being coordinator were a whirlwind of planning meetings, protocol studies, and long conversations with Alexander about the implementation of the new program. What had begun as purely professional meetings gradually transformed into something more intimate and complex. Alexander insisted they work together on developing the project, arguing that he needed to understand firsthand the perspective of someone with direct experience in night care. Their meetings extended beyond work hours, first in his hospital office, then in discreet coffee shops near the medical center. It was in those coffee shops that Sophia began to discover the man behind the CEO. Alexander always ordered a double espresso, no sugar, but he would hold his hands wrapped around the cup as if he needed the warmth more than the caffeine. There was a loneliness in him that she recognized because it was similar to her own, though lived under entirely different circumstances. "Did you always know you wanted to dedicate your life to medicine?" he asked one rainy afternoon, as they watched pedestrians hurry through the Chicago drizzle. Sophia smiled nostalgically. "I actually wanted to be a singer. I studied nursing as a backup plan, but when my mother had her stroke, let's just say life made the decision for me." Alexander noticed the touch of melancholy in her voice, the resignation of someone who had to bury dreams because of responsibility. "Have you ever thought about going back to it? To singing, I mean." "Dreams don't pay the bills," she replied with a sad smile. "Besides, I've learned to find music in other places, in my work, in the small moments of joy I can give to patients." "Like dancing in the hallways?" he asked, with a tenderness in his voice that surprised her. Sophia blushed, still unable to believe he had witnessed those intimate moments. It's my way of keeping a part of me alive that I don't want to lose, even if it seems silly." "It's not silly," Alexander murmured, his eyes fixed on hers. "It's the bravest thing I've ever seen." In that moment, Sophia dared to ask the question that had intrigued her since their first meeting. "And you? Did you always want to be the CEO of a hospital empire?" Alexander's expression tightened slightly, as if she had touched a wound that hadn't healed properly. "I didn't have much of a choice. My father built Provita from nothing, and since I was a child, he made it clear that I would be his successor. 'Coals don't fail,' he used to say. That sounds like a lot of pressure for a child." It was. Every decision, every grade in school, every relationship I formed, everything was judged on whether I was becoming a leader worthy of his legacy. Sophia studied his face, noticing the tension that appeared whenever he spoke of his father. "And what did you want to be when you grew up?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him that in years, perhaps decades. "An architect," he admitted after a long silence. "I wanted to design homes, spaces where families could be happy, places full of light." "What stopped you?" "My father died when I was 25. A stroke, like your mother, only he didn't survive." Sophia felt a lump in her throat upon hearing the similarity in their experiences. "I'm so sorry. The strangest part is that I spent years trying to prove to him that I was worthy of his respect, and when I finally had the chance, he was no longer there to see it." They fell silent, each lost in their own painful memories. It was Alexander who broke the moment of melancholy. "You know what strikes me most about working with you?" "What?" "That despite all the responsibilities you carry, you've never lost that ability to care for others with genuine joy. I lost that a long time ago." "You haven't lost it," Sophia replied with conviction. "It's just buried under many layers of other people's expectations." Their eyes met over their coffee cups, and Alexander felt something fundamental shift inside him. This woman had the ability to see parts of him he thought were dead, to awaken emotions he had buried under years of control and ambition. "Sophia, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, her heart suddenly racing. "Don't you find this strange, what's happening between us? A CEO and a nurse, sharing confessions as if we've known each other forever." Sophia took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, it's strange, but it's also the most real thing I've felt in a very long time." Alexander reached his hand across the table, his fingers barely brushing against hers. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible to any outside observer, but for the two of them, it was like a silent earthquake. "What are we doing?" he whispered. "I don't know," she admitted. "But for the first time in years, I don't care that I don't have all the answers." When they finally said goodbye that afternoon, they both knew they had crossed an invisible line. They were no longer just a boss and an employee collaborating on a project. They were two lonely souls who had found in each other something they didn't know they were looking for. The hospital humanization program Sophia had designed began to yield remarkable results. Patient satisfaction scores improved significantly, especially on the night shifts, where the new empathetic care techniques she implemented created a warmer, more welcoming atmosphere. However, professional success brought with it a complication that neither she nor Alexander had anticipated: gossip. Caroline was the first to warn her during a break in the hospital cafeteria. "Sophia, I have to tell you something, and I don't like it." Her friend looked at her with concern, and Sophia noted the unusual seriousness in Caroline's tone. "What's wrong?" "There are rumors going around about you and Mr. Cole. Some of the nurses are saying your promotion wasn't exactly based on professional merit." Sophia felt as if she had been punched in the gut. "Who's saying that?" "Mainly Paula Wisniewski from the 5th floor. You know how she is. She's always been jealous of anyone who stands out." Sophia knew Paula well, a head nurse with over 15 years of experience who never hid her resentment toward younger nurses who got opportunities she felt she deserved. "And what exactly is she saying?" Caroline hesitated before answering. "That an agency nurse doesn't become a coordinator overnight without some special influence. The words hit Sophia like a slap. Everything she had built, all her efforts to prove her professional competence, were being tainted by malicious insinuation. That afternoon, as she reviewed monthly reports in her new office, Sophia couldn't concentrate. Caroline's words echoed in her head, mixing with her own doubts. Was it true that her personal relationship with Alexander had influenced her appointment? They had crossed some lines without realizing it. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander entered with his usual elegance, but paused when he saw her troubled expression. "What's wrong? You look upset." Sophia decided to be direct. "They're talking about us. They're saying my position isn't due to merit, but for other reasons." Alexander's face immediately hardened. Who would dare to insinuate such a thing? It doesn't matter who. What matters is that they're right about one thing. Our relationship has become too personal to be just professional. Alexander closed the door behind him and approached her desk. "Sophia, your appointment was approved by Margaret Kowalski after a full review of your file, your performance evaluations, patient comments and colleague recommendations." "But you chose me before you checked all that," she interrupted him. "You chose me after you saw me dancing in the hallway." The silence that followed was tense. Alexander knew she was right, at least in part. His initial interest in her had been personal, even though he later discovered that her professional qualifications fully justified the decision. "Do you regret accepting the position?" "No," she answered without hesitation. "But I can't pretend that what's happening between us doesn't complicate everything." Alexander sat in the chair in front of her desk, as if he were the one who needed support. "What do you suggest we do? Maybe we should maintain more distance, at least until the program is consolidated and no one can question my competence." The suggestion hurt more than Alexander expected. In recent weeks, his conversations with Sophia had become the part of the day he most looked forward to. She was the only person with whom he could let his guard down, the only one who saw in him something more than the heir to a business empire. "If that's what you think we should do," he began. "It's not what I want to do," she admitted, with a vulnerability that completely disarmed him. "But maybe it's what we have to do." That night, Sophia walked the hospital corridors again, this time as a coordinator, not a nurse. She supervised the night shift. She checked that the new protocols were being followed. She talked to patients and their families about their emotional needs. In room 307, she ran into Mr. Franklin again, who received her with a knowing smile. "I see you don't dance in the hallways like you used to." "I have new responsibilities," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "Responsibilities shouldn't steal your joy, dear. If something makes you happy and doesn't harm anyone, why give it up?" His words stayed with her as she finished her rounds. When she reached the corridor where she used to dance, she stopped. The security cameras were still there, silent witnesses to the moment that had changed her life. For the first time since accepting the new position, she felt completely alone. Alexander, from his penthouse office, reviewed the same reports he had already read 3 times. His mind couldn't focus on anything but his conversation with Sophia. He had built his entire life around control and planning, but this woman had come to destabilize everything he thought he knew about himself. Was it possible to maintain a professional distance when every fiber of his being sought her out? Could they go back to being just a boss and an employee after everything they had shared? The answer, he feared, was that it was already too late to turn back. The following weeks were a slow torture for both of them. Alexander and Sophia maintained a facade of professionalism that fooled everyone except themselves. Their meetings were strictly limited to work-related topics. Their conversations became formal and distant, but the unexpressed tension between them was palpable. Sophia threw herself into her work with an almost desperate intensity. She expanded the humanization program to the 5th and 6th floors. She implemented music therapy workshops for long-term patients and established emotional support protocols that began to be studied by other hospitals in the group. Alexander, for his part, traveled constantly between Pravita's branches in New York, Los Angeles, and Miami, as if physical distance could diminish the emotional turmoil Sophia's presence caused in him. It was during one of these absences that an incident occurred that would change everything. Sophia was reviewing weekly reports in her office when Paula Wisniewski entered without knocking. The head nurse from the 5th floor had an expression of malicious satisfaction that immediately put Sophia on guard. Well, the coordinator is working late. Such dedication. "Do you need something, Paula?" Sophia asked, maintaining a professional tone despite the obvious hostility. "I just came to congratulate you. It seems your strategy worked perfectly." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, please, Sophia. We all know how you got this position. The agency nurse who suddenly becomes a coordinator after seducing the CEO. A brilliant move, I must admit." The words struck Sophia like slaps. She stood up, trembling with indignation. "I suggest you leave my office immediately." "What? Are you going to complain to your lover?" "My relationship with Mr. Cole is strictly professional," Sophia lied, though the words sounded empty even to her own ears. "Sure, that's why you were seen having dinner together at Gibson's last week. Very professional, no doubt." Sophia felt her world collapse. They had been so careful, so discreet, but apparently not enough. A work dinner had become ammunition to destroy her reputation. "Get out," she murmured, no longer having the strength to remain calm. "With pleasure. I just wanted you to know that you're not the only one who knows your secrets anymore." When Paula left, Sophia sank into her chair. The tears she had been holding back for weeks finally flowed. Everything she had worked for, everything she had achieved with such difficulty, was threatened by gossip and insinuation. Caroline found her like that an hour later. "My God, Sophia, what happened?" Between sobs, Sophia told her about the confrontation with Paula. Caroline listened with growing outrage. "That woman is venomous. She always has been. But she's right about one thing," Sophia admitted. "My relationship with Alexander isn't just professional. Every time we're together, in every conversation, in every look, there's something more, and that compromises everything I've built here. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the beginning. Set clear boundaries." That night, Sophia waited for Alexander to return from Miami. She sent him a text message requesting an urgent meeting in his hospital office. When he arrived around 10 o'clock, he found Sophia waiting for him with an expression that boded ill. "What's going on? Your message sounded urgent." "Paula Wisniewski came to see me today. She knows about our dinners, Alexander, and she's insinuating that our personal connection influenced my appointment." Alexander felt a cold fury course through him. That woman will be in trouble if she continues to spread baseless rumors. Baseless? Sophia looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Can you honestly tell me there's nothing personal between us?" Alexander's silence was answer enough. "Exactly," she continued. "We can't go on like this. Every day, every moment we share, makes it harder to maintain the line between the professional and the personal. Sophia, what I feel for you has nothing to do with your job." "But it does to the rest of the world," she exclaimed with a passion that surprised him. "My professional competence will always be questioned as long as there's any suspicion of a relationship between us." Alexander moved closer to her, but Sophia stepped back. "What are you proposing? That I ask for a transfer to another hospital in the group, or that you find someone else for this position? I won't do that. You are the best coordinator we've ever had, and I will not let the gossip of a bitter woman ruin your career. Then I'll submit my resignation." "Don't you dare!" Alexander's voice echoed in the office with an authority Sophia had never heard. "I won't let you quit over this. You don't have a choice. It's my decision." "Ah!" They stared at each other for a long moment, both aware that they had reached a point of no return. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice softer, but just as firm. "If that's really what you want, I won't stop you. But I want you to know that you'll be giving up something extraordinary, both professionally and personally. I know, Sophia whispered, but maybe some sacrifices are necessary. Detum, when Alexander left that night, they both knew that something beautiful and complex had just shattered between them, and neither knew if it could ever be repaired. 3 days after that devastating conversation, an article appeared in a Chicago tabloid that would change everything forever. The headline screamed, "CEO in Love." The hospital romance between tycoon Alexander Cole and an ambitious nurse. Sophia found out when Caroline burst into her Pilsen apartment with the newspaper in her hands and tears in her eyes. "Sophia, you have to see this. It's horrible." The article, filled with malicious insinuations and photos taken without her consent during the dinner at Gibson's, painted her as a young opportunist who had seduced the powerful CEO to get a meteoric promotion. The words stabbed her heart like daggers. From her wheelchair, her mother watched her daughter crumble. Honey, who could do something so cruel? Sophia knew exactly who had leaked the information. Paula had carried out her threat in the most public and humiliating way possible. When she arrived at the hospital that morning, the hallways were filled with furtive glances and whispers. Some colleagues greeted her with visible embarrassment, others simply avoided her. In the cafeteria, conversations died down as she passed. Margaret Kowalski summoned her to her office before noon. "Sophia, we need to talk about this situation." "I already know what you're going to say," Sophia replied with dignity. "I'm submitting my formal resignation." "Don't be hasty. Mr. Cole is furious. He's initiated legal action against the newspaper and is investigating who leaked the private information." "Doesn't matter what he does. My reputation is ruined. I can't work here knowing that every patient, every colleague is wondering if I earned my position in the CEO's bed." That afternoon, Sophia packed her personal belongings from her office, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Every diploma, every commendation she had received for her work now seemed tainted by the article's insinuations. Alexander stormed into the office as she was finishing emptying her desk. "What do you think you're doing?" "What I should have done from the beginning," she replied without looking at him. "Leaving before this destroys us both. Sophia, we will clear your name. I have the best lawyers working on it." "That's not the point," she cried, turning to face him, her eyes full of tears. "The point is, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong in your world." The words hit Alexander like a hammer. He moved closer, ignoring the fact that the office's glass walls made them visible to anyone passing in the corridor. "How can you say that? You are the most authentic, most talented person I've ever met. I'm a nurse from Pilsen, Alexander. You're the CEO of a hospital empire. This was inevitable. And what about what we feel? Does that not count at all?" The question hung in the air. Sophia looked into his eyes, and for a moment all the professional distance they had tried to maintain vanished. "That's exactly why I have to leave," she whispered. "Because what I feel for you is making me lose everything I am." Alexander felt as if something vital were being ripped from his chest. Without thinking, he took a step toward her. "Before you, I had everything but this. You taught me how to feel." His words broke through Sophia's last defenses. Months of restrained tension, unexpressed desire, and hidden emotions exploded in a moment of absolute vulnerability. "And you taught me that I could be more than I ever thought possible," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But look at the price we're paying." Alexander reached out to her face, his thumb barely brushing a tear rolling down her cheek. "What price is too high for something real?" Their gazes held for an eternal moment. The outside world ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, surrounded by everything they had built and everything they were about to lose. "I can't do this to you," Sophia murmured. "I can't be the reason your reputation is damaged. And I can't let you leave knowing what you mean to me." The confession floated between them like a truth that had finally found its voice. They both knew they had reached a point where they could no longer pretend that what they felt was just an attraction or a mutual curiosity. It was love, a destructive, complicated, impossible love, but love nonetheless. The sound of footsteps in the corridor brought them sharply back to reality. Sophia stepped back, picked up her box of belongings, and headed for the door. "Goodbye, Alexander." He watched her go, unable to stop her, aware that he had just lost the most precious thing he had found in years. 2 weeks after her resignation, Sophia was working as an agency nurse again, this time at St. Anthony's Hospital. It was a different environment, more impersonal, where no one knew her history with Provita. She returned to night shifts, to temporary contracts, to the financial uncertainty she thought she had left behind. But at night, as she walked the quiet corridors of St. Anthony's, she no longer danced. The music had disappeared from her life, along with everything else. Alexander, for his part, made work his obsession. He traveled constantly, aggressively expanded the hospital group, and worked until late at night, as if physical exhaustion could silence the emotional void Sophia's absence had left in his life. Margaret Kowalski informed him that the hospital humanization program Sophia had created was still a huge success, but he couldn't listen to the reports without feeling a pang of pain. Every mention of her name was a reminder of what he had lost by failing to protect what mattered most to him. It was on a rainy May night that fate decided to intervene again. Alexander was returning from a meeting in New York when he received a call from Margaret. Her voice was anxious, worried. "Alexander, something's happened. Mr. Franklin, the patient from room 307, his condition has worsened. He's specifically asking for Sophia. He says he needs to say goodbye to her." The old man who had witnessed their first meeting was living his final hours, and his only request was to see the nurse he had come to love like a daughter. "Have you contacted her?" "Yes, she's coming tonight. I thought you should know." Alexander closed his eyes, his heart racing at the thought of seeing her again. "Thank you for letting me know." At 11 o'clock that night, Sophia quietly entered room 307. Mr. Franklin was awake, waiting for her, with a faint but affectionate smile. "There's my girl. I knew you'd come." Sophia took his wrinkled hand in hers, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "How are you feeling, Mr. Franklin?" "Tired, but at peace. I wanted to see you one last time to tell you something important. Please, go on. That man, the CEO, I've seen him since you left. He comes to visit me every week and he always asks about you. He's suffering, dear." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. "Mr. Franklin, things are complicated. At my age, I've learned that the important things are never simple. But I've also learned that true love doesn't happen many times in a lifetime. How can you be so sure it's true love? Because when he talks about you, his eyes light up in the same way yours do when you talk about him." His words echoed in Sophia's heart like bells of truth. She had been so focused on protecting her professional reputation that she had lost sight of what was most important. What she felt for Alexander was real, deep, transformative. "Promise me something," Mr. Franklin continued, his voice weak. "Promise me you won't let fear take away your chance to be happy." "I promise," Sophia whispered, kissing his forehead. The old man closed his eyes with a smile of peace. It was midnight when Sophia left the room. The corridor was dim, lit only by the emergency lights that brought back so many memories. And then she saw him. Alexander was standing at the end of the hall, as if he had been waiting for her. He was wearing a rumpled suit. He had deep shadows under his eyes, and in his gaze was a vulnerability she had never seen before. They looked at each other for a long moment, without moving, without speaking. All the pain of the past weeks, all the forced distance, all the restrained love hung in the air between them. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice hoarse. "I couldn't let you go through this alone. How did you know I'd be here?" "Margaret called me. Mr. Franklin, he's been like a grandfather to me these past months. When I found out you were coming, you couldn't stop yourself from seeing me," she finished with a sad smile. "I haven't been able to stop myself from anything that has to do with you since the day I saw you dance." The words hung between them, charged with everything they hadn't been able to say to each other for weeks. Sophia felt her heart race, felt all the logical reasons to stay away from him crumble in the face of the reality of what she felt. "Alexander, Don't say anything yet," he interrupted, approaching slowly. "Just let me be near you tonight. After the pain of Mr. Franklin, after everything we've been through, I just need to know there's still something real between us." Sophia looked into his eyes and saw the same emptiness she had felt since leaving Mercy General. She saw a man who had sacrificed his happiness to protect her reputation, who was just as lost as she was. Without a word, she reached out her hand to him. Alexander took it as if it were the most precious thing in the world, and together they walked into the silence of the night, knowing that everything between them was about to change forever. Alexander drove in silence through the empty streets of Chicago, while Sophia watched the nocturnal city from the passenger seat. Neither of them had spoken since leaving the hospital. Words seemed unnecessary when a mutual understanding flowed between them like an invisible current. He took her to his penthouse on the Gold Coast. When the elevator doors closed behind them, the physical proximity became almost unbearable. They could hear each other's ragged breaths, feel the heat radiating from their bodies, sense the tension that had built up over weeks of forced separation. Entering the apartment, Sophia walked to the windows overlooking the river. The city lights stretched out like a carpet of earthly stars, creating an intimate and warm atmosphere that contrasted with the emotional chill they had been living through. "It's beautiful," she murmured, aware that he was standing behind her, so close she could feel his presence like warmth on her back. "I used to spend hours looking at this view, but I never found it truly beautiful until tonight." Sophia turned slowly. Alexander was standing a few inches from her, his eyes filled with emotions he had suppressed for too long. "Why is tonight different?" "Because for the first time in weeks, I can look at you with no barriers between us, no protocols, no fear, no professional masks." Their hands met naturally, as if they had been waiting for this moment their whole lives. Alexander's fingers gently caressed Sophia's, sending electric waves through her entire body. "I was lost without you," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I tried to tell myself I did the right thing, but every day felt incomplete. And I was functioning on autopilot, pretending I could go back to being the man I was before I met you." They looked into each other's eyes for an eternal moment. In that gaze, they communicated all the sleepless nights, all the times they wanted to call and didn't, all the love they had tried to deny. Alexander raised a hand to gently cup Sophia's face. His thumb traced the line of her cheek with a tenderness that made her tremble. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back." "We crossed it a long time ago," she replied. "Tonight, we're just being honest about it." When their lips finally met, it was as if the entire world realigned itself around them. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, filled with the tenderness of two people who had missed each other deeply. Then it intensified, charged with all the pent-up passion, all the desire they had denied for months. Alexander's hands tangled in Sophia's hair, while she clung to him as if he were her anchor in an emotional storm. Between kisses, they whispered the words of love they had held back for too long, quiet promises that they would never be apart again. He carried her in his arms to his bedroom, where the open curtains allowed the moonlight to bathe the bed in a silvery glow. They paused at the head of the bed, looking at each other with a mixture of desire and infinite tenderness. "I love you," Alexander murmured, the words escaping his lips like a confession he could no longer contain. "And I love you," Sophia replied, feeling tears of happiness stream down her cheeks. They made love that night with an intensity that went beyond the physical. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a silent declaration of absolute devotion. Alexander worshipped every inch of her skin as if it were sacred territory, while Sophia received him with a total trust that moved him to tears. It wasn't just sex. It was a communion of souls who had found their perfect complement in each other. It was the surrender of two people who had fought against love and had finally decided to yield to its transformative power. Afterward, they lay in each other's arms as the city slept at their feet. Sophia traced imaginary circles on Alexander's chest while he gently stroked her hair. "What do we do now?" she asked in a sleepy voice. "We fight for this," he answered with determination. "I don't care what people say anymore. I don't care about corporate protocols. I only care about you. The gossip will get worse. Then we'll give them something real to talk about." Sophia lifted her head to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're not going to hide anymore. I want the world to know that I love you, that you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, and that anyone who has a problem with it can go to hell." His fierce declaration brought a smile to her face. For the first time in weeks, Sophia felt that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to have both love and professional dignity. "And if I lose my job at St. Anthony's? Then you'll work with me at Provita as my partner, not as an employee." The proposal took her breath away. Alexander was serious. He was willing to change the entire structure of his company to protect what they had found together. "You would do that for me?" "I would do anything for you," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "Absolutely anything." The morning came too soon, but for the first time in weeks, both Sophia and Alexander woke without the weight of anxiety in their chests. She had fallen asleep in his arms, and he had spent much of the night just watching her sleep, marveling that he finally had the woman who had transformed his world close to him. When Sophia opened her eyes and met Alexander's tender gaze, she smiled with a happiness she had forgotten she could feel. "Good morning," she murmured, snuggling closer. "The best of my life," he replied, gently kissing her hair. The reality of the day ahead gradually imposed itself. Sophia had to work that night at St. Anthony's, and Alexander had a board meeting at Provita, but they both knew that something fundamental had changed between them, and that they would not let the outside world separate them again. "Do you have any regrets?" Alexander asked, making coffee in his modern kitchen. "Quite the opposite," Sophia replied, watching him move with that natural elegance that attracted her so much. "For the first time in weeks, I feel whole." He came up and wrapped his arms around her from behind as she looked out at the awakening Chicago skyline. "I want you to know this won't be easy. The gossip will get worse. There will be media pressure." "I know," she interrupted, turning in his arms, "but I also know that I don't want to live in fear of what others think anymore." That same morning, Alexander called an emergency board meeting at Provita. When he entered the conference room, his determination was palpable. The 5 board members waited for him with expressions of curiosity and concern. "Gentlemen, I have gathered you to communicate a personal decision that may have implications for the company." Robert Mendoza, the most senior board member, leaned forward. "What is it, Alexander?" "I am going to make my personal involvement with Sophia Miller, our former patient well-being coordinator, public. I know this may cause controversy, but I will not allow rumors and speculation to tarnish the reputation of an extraordinary woman." The silence that followed was tense. Finally, Teresa Ruiz, the only woman on the board, spoke. "Are you prepared for the media consequences this could bring?" "I am prepared for whatever is necessary." Sophia Miller is not an opportunist, as some media outlets have suggested. She is a brilliant professional who has created programs that are being replicated in hospitals across the country. "And what do you propose to do about the conflict of interest?" another board member asked. "I propose that Provita hire her services as an independent external consultant. She will develop hospital humanization programs for the entire group with full professional autonomy." The proposal was intelligent and ethical. Alexander had found a way to protect both Sophia's professional reputation and their personal relationship. Meanwhile, Sophia was facing her own battle at St. Anthony's. The news of her relationship with Alexander had reached there as well, and some colleagues looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and renewed respect. Carolyn came to visit her during her break. "Is it true what they're saying? That he's going to make a public statement?" Yes, Sophia replied with a smile. We're not going to hide anymore. And you're not scared? I am, but I'm more scared of living without him, Caroline. When you truly love someone, when you find the person who completes you, the opinions of others become irrelevant. That afternoon, Alexander held a press conference at Provita headquarters. Journalists filled the room, expecting announcements about the company's expansion. Instead, they got something completely unexpected. Ladies and gentlemen, I have invited you here to clarify some rumors that have been circulating in the media about my personal and professional life. The cameras focused on him as he spoke with the authority of someone completely sure of his decisions. I confirm that I am in a relationship with Ms. Sophia Miller. This relationship began after getting to know her exceptional professional work, not before. Ms. Miller is one of the most talented nurses I have ever met, and any insinuation that her professional competence is questionable is completely false. A journalist raised his hand. Don't you think this constitutes a conflict of interest? That is precisely why Provita has hired Ms. Miller's services as an independent external consultant. She will develop hospital humanization programs for our group and for other medical institutions in the country. The questions continued, but Alexander answered each one with the confidence of a man who had made the right decision. When Sophia saw the press conference that night, she felt a mixture of pride and love that took her breath away. Alexander had risked his professional reputation to protect her. He had transformed a potentially destructive situation into an opportunity for growth for both of them. Her phone rang. It was him. "Did you see the news?" "Yes," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "I can't believe you did that for me. I didn't just do it for you. I did it for us. It's time the world knew that Alexander Cole can love like any other man." That night, as she finished her shift at St. Anthony's, Sophia knew her life had changed forever. She was no longer an agency nurse dancing in solitude to keep hope alive. She was a woman loved by the most powerful man in the country's hospital sector, and he was a man who had found his humanity in her arms. 6 months after the press conference, Sophia's hospital humanization program had become a national model. Hospitals from all over the country requested her services as a consultant, and the empathetic care techniques she had developed were beginning to be taught in medical schools. Her independent office, located in an elegant building near Michigan Avenue, became the center of a small revolution in hospital care. Sophia hired Caroline as her lead assistant, and together they formed a team that traveled the country, implementing programs that transformed the experiences of patients and their families. Her relationship with Alexander flourished without the pressure of secrecy. They had dinner together several times a week, sometimes traveled for work, and found a perfect balance between professional independence and personal intimacy. One November afternoon, as Sophia was reviewing proposals in her office, she received an unexpected call from Margaret Kowalski. "Sophia, I have news that will make you happy. Paula Wisniewski has been fired for leaking confidential information to the press. The investigation found that she had violated multiple confidentiality clauses." The news surprised her, though she felt no satisfaction in another's misfortune. "How are things at Mercy General?" "Better than ever. Your program continues to produce incredible results. Actually, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "The Department of Health and Human Services wants to implement your protocols across the entire public hospital network. It would be a national contract." Sophia held her breath. It was the biggest professional opportunity of her life, a chance to positively impact the lives of millions of patients across the country. That night, when she told Alexander about it during an intimate dinner at their favorite restaurant, he looked at her with admiration and pride. "That's incredible, Sophia. In less than a year, you've gone from being an agency nurse to becoming the most respected hospital humanization consultant in the country." "None of this would have been possible without your support," she replied, taking his hand across the table. Everything was possible because of your talent. I was just lucky enough to recognize it before anyone else." Their gazes held with that intimacy that had grown between them over months of building a solid relationship based on mutual respect and authentic love. "Alexander, I have a proposal for you." "What do you mean?" "A getaway, just the two of us. We haven't had time to just be together in months." He smiled that smile he reserved only for her. "Do you have a place in mind?" "Galena, Illinois. I want to show you the town where my mother was born, where I learned to love music." The following weekend, Alexander drove to Galena while Sophia watched the landscape from the passenger seat. There was a new serenity on her face, the tranquility of a woman who had found her place in the world, both professionally and personally. They stayed in a small inn with a view of the Galena River. They walked the cobblestone streets. They visited historic sites. They had lunch on a terrace overlooking the old storefronts. It was the first time in months they could simply enjoy each other's company without work schedules or social commitments. That night, after dinner at a restaurant with live music, the singer invited guests to participate. Alexander looked at Sophia with that expression of silent encouragement she had learned to recognize. "Do you dare?" he whispered. "After everything we've been through, I don't think I'm afraid of making a fool of myself in public anymore." Sophia approached the small stage and spoke with the musician. When the first chords of Comptine d'un autre été sounded, the melody that had been her companion on so many lonely nights in the hospital, the entire room fell silent. Her voice, sweet and emotional, filled the intimate space of the restaurant. She sang with her eyes closed at first. Then she sought Alexander's gaze in the audience. When their eyes met, he felt his heart stop. The woman he had met dancing in solitude in a hospital corridor was now singing for him, for the whole room, with the confidence of someone who had reclaimed her lost authenticity. She was no longer the insecure nurse who feared she didn't deserve a place in his world. She was a complete, fulfilled woman who had found a way to succeed professionally without giving up her essence. When she finished the song, the applause was spontaneous and emotional. Sophia returned to their table with flushed cheeks and shining eyes. "That was liberating," she confessed. "It was perfect," Alexander replied, gently kissing her hands. "Like you." That night, walking back to the inn under the stars of Galena, Alexander knew it was time to ask the question he'd been planning for months. In his pocket, a small velvet box awaited the perfect moment, but that question would have to wait one more night. This night was for celebrating what they had built together, a love that had survived gossip, social pressure, and their own fears to become something solid, authentic, and unbreakable. A year to the day after Alexander first saw Sophia dancing on the security cameras, he decided it was time to close the circle in the most perfect way possible. He meticulously planned every detail of this special night. He chartered a private boat for a night cruise on the Chicago River, decorated with soft lights that created a magical atmosphere under the starry city sky. Sophia thought it was a romantic dinner to celebrate the first anniversary of their official relationship. She wore an elegant navy blue dress, the same color she had worn on the night of the gala where it all began, and arrived at the dock with the radiant smile that was now a permanent part of her face. During dinner, they talked about future projects. The National Hospital Humanization Program was about to be implemented, and Sophia had received invitations to lecture at universities across Europe. Her consulting firm had grown into a company of 12 employees, and the techniques she had developed were being studied in international medical schools. Alexander, for his part, had transformed Provita into more than just a successful hospital group. The philosophy of humanized care that Sophia had introduced had become the hallmark of all his facilities, generating not only better medical outcomes, but also greater job satisfaction among the staff. "Do you remember the first time we talked?" Alexander asked, as the boat glided gently under Chicago's illuminated bridges. "In Mr. Franklin's room. You told me you liked easing other people's pain, even if it was just for a few minutes." Sophia smiled, remembering the mix of nervousness and fascination she had felt during that first encounter. Who would have thought that conversation would completely change our lives? I knew you were special from that moment, Alexander admitted, but I never imagined you would change not only the way I see my work, but the way I see life itself. When they finished dinner, he invited her to the bow of the boat, where Chicago stretched out before them like a tapestry of golden lights. Sophia, there's something I want to show you before I do what I planned for tonight. Alexander took out his phone and played a video. The recording of that night in the hospital appeared on the screen. Sophia dancing alone among the medicine carts, illuminated by the emergency lights, lost in her world of silent music. This was the moment my life changed, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. That's when I realized I had been living a half-life, that I had become an empty version of myself. Sophia watched the recording with tears in her eyes. The woman dancing on that screen seemed to be from another era, a version of herself that existed when she still believed that happiness was a luxury she couldn't afford. That woman was so lonely, she whispered. And so was that man, Alexander replied, putting the phone away and taking her hands. But look at what we've built together. They fell silent for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the journey they had taken. From that lonely night in the hospital to this night of love and fulfillment on the river, they had overcome gossip, social pressure, personal doubts, and professional fears to find something neither of them thought possible, a love that completed them without diminishing them. Alexander stepped back slightly and, to Sophia's surprise, knelt on one knee on the deck of the boat. With trembling hands, he took a small blue velvet box from his pocket. Sophia Miller, the woman who taught me that strength and tenderness can coexist, who showed me that success without a soul is not true success. His voice broke slightly with emotion. Will you dance with me for the rest of our lives? When he opened the box, a diamond ring sparkled in the lights of Chicago, reflecting on the water. But Sophia barely saw it, because she was lost in the eyes of the man who had transformed her existence from one of survival to a life full of purpose and love. Yes, she replied through tears of joy, with all my heart, yes. As Alexander placed the ring on her finger and stood up to kiss her, Sophia felt she had finally found her place in the world. She was no longer the agency nurse who danced in solitude to keep hope alive. She was a woman loved and chosen by the most extraordinary man she had ever met, a respected professional who had transformed hospital care in the country, a daughter who had managed to provide financial security for her mother. But above all, she was just Sophia, authentic, whole, and happy. As they kissed under the Chicago stars, with the city lights as witnesses to their engagement, they both remembered the woman who danced in the dark, not knowing that someone in the shadows was already beginning to love her. The circle had closed perfectly. They would never dance alone again.